and welcome to the Wellness with Juanita podcast. I'm your host, Juanita Nagai, an American living in Japan for 20 years. I've gone through some massive life changes and crises in my 20 years here. At its bleakest, I felt very isolated, alone, and helpless in the face of what was happening. I relied on alcohol and cigarettes to get through it the best I knew how, which worked until it didn't, and everything fell apart. I made it through with a little help from my friends, a fledgling mindfulness practice, and learning how to become my own strongest ally. I quit drinking and smoking, worked my way through my grief, found ways to forgive, created new connections, and started a regular exercise, meditation, and self-care routine. I've also become a national board certified health and wellness coach along the way, and developed a desire and passion to help others on their own personal journeys. This podcast is all about change, growth, healing yourself, learning how to get back up after life kicks you down, and exploring mindfulness and self-compassion as incredible tools available to each and every one of us to do just that. Hello, and welcome to the Wellness with Juanita podcast. I'm your host, Juanita Nagai. And here we are again, the world still a wild and crazy and scary kind of place. And the thing that has been coming up to me recently in my own personal life, in addition to trying to just hold and handle and process all of the insanity that has been happening on the global stage as well, is how do I and how do we collectively protect our peace, especially when it really needs to be protected, especially when our inner wisdom and resilience and strength and all of these beautiful positive features of ourselves that we are ideally cultivating and growing and nourishing within us. But what do we do when all of those things are really put to the test? When we really need it, when push comes to shove, how do we hold on to our inner strength and our inner core? How do we protect our peace? And so I thought today I would spend this episode discussing some actual practical things that have worked for me, and talk about this in kind of broader, general, as a member of the human race terms, and also what we can do and how we can explore this in our own personal, individualized, unique lives as well. Because we're all different. We're all the same, but we're all different. And so both of these parts of this exploration are very important. So, to start with the basics, as a human animal, as a living, breathing creature in this finite meat case, in this skin suit, and in this body, a wonderful place to start checking in is with the basics. Are you getting enough sleep, hydration, nourishing activities, whether that is social interactions? Relationships are hugely influential and impactful for our happiness and our even physical well-being. Your hobbies, the little things that bring you joy, are you making the time and the space for them? Even 10 minutes a day, are you finding a little corner in your routine that you can devote to something that lights you up or something that brings you joy? But those basics, yes. So sleep is really, really important, and something that over the years I have realized is vitally important for me is getting enough sleep and making that a priority and taking the steps necessary to create the rhythm and the routine that is just a no-brainer, and it's not like a daily struggle. There is a handy-dandy acronym called HALT that we can use to check in with ourselves or with our children, with others, that stands for hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. They're the kind of 4 different questions we can ask ourselves when we're feeling really frustrated or really stressed out or really short-tempered, we can check in with ourselves. Are we hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And then the idea is that we can use that mnemonic and that acronym to then address the source of those problems. So tired is the last one, right? Sleep is really important. As I mentioned, relationships, that stands for the L, the loneliness. The hungry, okay? So again, are we taking care of our basic needs? Are we eating nourishing foods that help our bodies, or are we choosing to stress eat or snack or go for the sugar or whatever perhaps your guilty pleasure or naughty habit is? What choices are we making regarding the food and the things that we are putting into our body? That would address the H, the hunger. And then angry, honestly, at this point, I think if you're not angry, you're not really paying attention. So I think that it's a pretty valid reaction and emotion to be having if you're thinking about the political or global scale at the moment. But maybe we can use that A, that angry, as a way to kind of check in with our emotions, just our emotional state in general. Like, how are you feeling? What's going on for you on an emotional level? So all of these basics. I think movement is also another one that can really help. Of course, I'm a health and wellness coach. This is kind of what I do for a living. I'm all about helping people create the habits and the routines that serve them best, incorporating all of these healthy, ideal ways of being. But we don't have to go big or go home. We can start with really simple things like just choosing to walk to the station instead of riding our bike, or choosing to go up the stairs instead of taking the elevator or the escalator, or just dancing around in your kitchen. That's something that I've been doing a lot of almost every night as I make dinner, just listening to music that I love, listening loud, letting that joyful experience in, and letting my body just move to that rhythm, to that beat, just enjoying living in this skin encased meat suit and being this finite being in this moment right now. Just enjoying the moment. So my first kind of tendency is to go to the basics. Check in with yourself, see what you are doing, if that might require keeping a note of your daily activities or your weekly activities to see where you want to change things. That's a wonderful way to start. Just noticing, again, maybe using that HALT acronym, checking in like, okay, so where do I feel something that's lacking? Or where do I feel like, okay, that's an area I could work on? What is my energy being naturally attracted to there? If you need help working with any of these basics, please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to hop on a discovery call and kind of brainstorm and think about some first steps in creating a blueprint for how you can practically change things. But beyond the basics, I think that the next kind of phase of how we protect our peace is to remember who we are. For me, this idea to remember who we are, or remember who I am, has a deeper, more spiritual level to it. And then it also has just the kind of individual who I am, Juanita Nicole Nagai, as this unique spirit and unique person on this planet in this unique time and space. So I'm going to briefly talk about both of them. But I'm going to start deep, and I'm going to start, wigged out, because that's how I like to do. But remembering who we are at our most basic, innermost core, we are this miraculous being that has come into existence in this unique time and in this unique space. We are literally made of the same things that stars in the galaxy are. So we are literally made of stardust. And the incredible infinite amount of coincidences and connections and all of our ancestors, everything that has come before us in order for us to be here right now is literally mind-blowing. The fact that we are here is such a gift and such a miracle. And on top of that, I believe that our innate basic nature is good and loving and kind and compassionate. I really deeply believe that all of us have this Buddha nature within us, even if it doesn't seem like that, and even if it feels like there are a lot of really great examples that might be the exceptions to the rule, I do believe that that really is the most basic kind of core seed of purity and goodness within us, is this inherent beauty and love and compassion. Now, that can get covered up and that can get lost. And I think so many of us, if not all of us, we are human and we experience life and we have all of these experiences and we have all of this conditioning and we all grow up in certain cultures and certain places and all of these outside factors. And of course, there is genetics that go into it as well. But all of these external factors shape us into the unique beings that we are. And we all suffer. And we all have really painful events that happen in our lives. And we find ways to deal with that. Sometimes they are not healthy or the most skillful ways. I have shared very openly on this podcast and in other places that for a really long time, I used alcohol and cigarettes to deal by not dealing, right? To kind of numb out and relax and not let myself feel the intense emotions that I was struggling with. We all have something. And maybe for you, maybe that is the guilty pleasure, binge watching Netflix, maybe more than you should. Maybe that's eating some secret treat that just really comforts you and it makes you feel better, right? I mean, maybe it's gambling or online shopping or whatever. There's all these different ways that we try to just deal with the pain of being human. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you or with us. And there's no judgment about what it is that we choose to do. I believe that it is simply part and parcel of being human. We suffer. That sucks. That hurts. We don't want to suffer. We want to make the pain go away. So usually as young children, we find ways that make the pain go away, and then that works. Except that we just continue to do that on and on and on and on and on until maybe it's not actually working or helping anymore. And if we're lucky as adults, we realize that. Either we come to that realization on our own, or life throws us face down into the mud with some traumatic or really difficult experience that wakes us up like that. And then we realize that we have the power to change these coping mechanisms or these unskillful ways of being or these habits that we realize are no longer serving us. So that is kind of how I see who we are in a deeper, global, the essence of what it means to be human kind of a way. I hope there were some gems in there for you. And if there were, please do send me a message and let me know. But what I'd like to move into next is this: remember who you are in the more individual who you are, just like I have explored who I am as an individual through various contemplative practices and studies and self-reflection. So I am a person who journals. I find great value in it. It is very illuminating and very entertaining to go back and read through old journals and see how I have grown and changed and evolved. And it doesn't take very long for me to, go back to an old journal and think like, what was I thinking? And why did I think that way? Or what was going on? But I can see a definite progression. And I heartily endorse the practice if it's something that speaks to you. There's lots of different ways to do it. Some people sit down every morning or every night. That's too much for me. I take a much more less structured approach, and I reach for my journal when I feel like I need to process through something. Self-reflective practices in general, such as journaling, can be hugely illuminating and hugely helpful in figuring out what is most important to you. There are also various different kinds of personality quizzes, for lack of a better word. Some are more scientifically backed than others. There's things like the Myers-Briggs personality inventory, which has some criticism and has baggage with it. I enjoyed taking it nonetheless, and I felt like it had a very accurate description of a lot of parts of my personality. It was very fascinating to read about all these different parts of my world, parts of my life through that lens. However, for today, I am going to highlight a much more scientifically, rigorously verified personality measure called the VIA Character Strengths Profile. And this was actually created by Martin Seligman, who is kind of the grandfather of positive psychology, which is where coaching kind of sprang from originally. And so he really studied, after studying things like learned helplessness and why originally dogs, but also then translated later into people, but why some people just gave up. They learned that there was no point and it was hopeless, and kind of like where the origins of despair came from. But moving from this idea of learned helplessness, he then started studying, well, what are people getting right? Like successful teams or successful organizations or even successful people, what are the things that they are doing well that is causing them to succeed or causing them to lead happy, healthy, productive lives? And thus, positive psychology was born. So he created this VIA character strengths profile. And when you take it, it basically asks you a series of questions, but then it ranks 24 different character strengths. They're all strengths. And the important thing to keep in mind if you choose to take this strengths profile, which I will link to in the show notes, is that you will have strengths. You will have your top 5 or 10 even. And that also necessarily means that you're going to have the bottom 5 or 10. It's 24 different strengths ranked according to the way that you answer the questions. So that's kind of the first caveat that I always mention to clients that I share this with, and to anyone who's thinking about doing this. We want to set the self-criticism and the judging mind aside when we go into any of this self-reflection work. You want to keep in mind that just as you're going to have some that are your strongest, you're going to have some that are your weakest, and to do your best to not feel bad or judge yourself or wonder, well, what the heck is wrong with me because this one is the last one on my list, right? If you can keep your perspective and take it with a grain of salt, it can be illuminating and interesting to see what is at the bottom of your list. I kind of giggled and was like, yep, okay, fair enough. Those are things that are not very important to me, or I know that I am not very good at. They are not my strengths. So it's no surprise that they're at the bottom of my list. However, Dr. Seligman and the developers of this profile, the strengths profile, really encourage people to just concentrate on the top strengths. So your top 5, or say even your your top 10, to look at those top ones as the kind of information to be gained from this personality quiz, as it were. The idea here is that if you look at your top 5, it helps you to more clearly see what is most important to you, and or what you really embody, maybe, or what your strongest character strengths are, although I hesitate to kind of say it in that way. And I am going to use my strengths as actual examples and speaking about this soon, but I think of it as a kind of values activity. What are the things that are most important to you in your life? And what are the things that really, on a deep personal level, make you tick, or would make you tick if you were able to find ways to incorporate them into your life in a more profound, meaningful, or even frequent way? So, as it may help to think about this in practical terms, my number 1 strength is love, which is no surprise if you know me at all. But it doesn't just mean love like warm fuzzies and peace, love, and happiness and hippies. It specifically means valuing close relations with others, in particular those in which sharing and caring are reciprocated, and being close to people. So this is very important to me in my life, and I do highly value and treasure my close relationships. I think this is an indication of how me making a career pivot and moving into coaching and helping people in this really close, intimate way. This is why it feels like what I am here to do. It feels like such meaningful work to me because it ties directly in with this top value of mine. My second value is love of learning, which is mastering new skills, topics, and bodies of knowledge, whether on one's own or formally, related to the strength of curiosity, which is my number 7, but goes beyond it to describe the tendency to add systematically to what one knows. So again, no great surprise here. I am a great big nerd. I love learning. I love studying. I love reading. I love improving myself. I have a deep thirst for knowledge and information and learning about why and how the world and people and things work in the way that they do. So again, love of learning. I thought that it was also helpful that it mentions not necessarily formally. I would have loved to get my PhD, but that has not happened yet. That's not in the cards thus far. But I do really enjoy taking online courses or joining different programs and groups, whether that's self-led or whether that's live. That actually has been a way for me to connect to that part of myself that really thrives on learning new things and being stimulated and just being challenged. I'm really happy that I have found a way to come back to that in the past few years of my life, because for a long time, since graduating undergrad, basically, I didn't. So again, you can see how that is one of my strongest values, and that is something that I have recently began again, and it's really, really satisfying. So number 3 is appreciation of beauty and excellence. Noticing and appreciating beauty, excellence, and or skilled performance in various domains of life, from nature to art to mathematics to science to everyday experience. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but this is why my contemplative practices are so important, why getting into nature and just letting in the good, letting in these beautiful, miraculous moments that happen throughout my day are a really simple and profound way to connect into one of my strongest values. Number 4 is leadership, and number 5 is creativity. Thinking of novel and productive ways to conceptualize and do things, including artistic achievement, but is not limited to it. And again, I think creativity speaks to just my kind of proclivity to want to think outside the box and to want to explore new and different pathways and ways of thinking and seeing. So I share my top 5 as just a way to see how, in my case, in recent years, since I have gone through this process of personal development and transformation from who I was, say, 10 years ago to who I am now. I think 10 years ago, me was not incorporating a lot of these into her life. I think that might have been why I was suffering so much on a kind of deep existential level. I wasn't connected, or I wasn't experiencing a lot of these things in any kind of regular or maybe meaningful way. But now my life, the way that I have crafted it and I have changed it, I really value all of these things, obviously, but I also value incorporating them into my life and cultivating them in a very intentional and conscious way. So today's takeaway is the VIA character strengths profile. I will put the link to that in the show notes. And if you're curious, have at it. You can take the quiz. It is free. They might ask for your email address, but you will get the 24 strengths sent to that email. And look at your top 5. See if there are any surprises. See if there are any areas where you would like to spend some time on, to think about how you can incorporate them or increase them in your life in a more conscious, intentional way. And once you do that, once you have your core values, there's lots of other ways to get to your core values. But for today's podcast episode, I'm just focusing on this character strengths profile, because I really believe that once we have our most important, nearest and dearest to our hearts things articulated, we are then able to work at incorporating them into our lives in more intentional and maybe frequent ways. But this is one of the most profoundly effective, but also deeply satisfying ways to protect our peace. If you are living according to your values daily, it's really hard for the outside noise to get in. If you are sure of yourself and who you are and what's important to you, and you have actual evidence of that in the choices you make, in the actions you take, you are living your most aligned, truest, authentic life, and you are being your most aligned, authentic, truest self. And from there, you're kind of untouchable. Of course, we have to live within this world, and we are worried about the world. I mean, God knows how much we could go off about how messed up things are right now and how scary and just fearful we can be right now. But I think that if we succumb to despair, overall, like, we got to feel the feels, sometimes I freak out too. That's totally human. We're human. We're not robots, right? But overall, if we just let ourselves slide into despair and giving up and apathy, the forces of evil win. And I don't want to play that way. I want to be a shining light for whoever wants it. I want to be a shining light for myself, for my family, for my friends, those that are closest to me in my community. But also, I want to let my light shine as big and as far and as vast for whoever needs it or wants it or happens to see it. So that's how I am choosing to approach life in general, but especially life in this really surreal time that we find ourselves in. And if you can identify what's most important to you, how you can really notice that you're living from that spot, the stronger and more resilient you become, the better you're able to protect your own peace, and the better you're able to then show up for others that need it, whether that's your partner, your children, your parents, your friends, your coworkers, your community. Again, I really believe that the more we devote energy and compassion and kindness to ourselves, the more it just ripples out in stronger and stronger waves to the rest of the world. So that is my episode for today. Please do feel free to reach out if you have any questions or comments, if you'd like some professional help in delving in deep to your values, or even looking at your daily life, your habits, what you are doing or what you're not doing, what you'd like to be doing more of. I'm accepting clients on a one-to-one basis. You are always welcome to send me a message in my DMs or my email. All that good stuff is in the show notes. But until next time, thank you so much for listening, and take care.